Hey, this is Dancing Rabbit, and I am so glad that you decided to tune in once again excuse me, for this fourth day of the 31 days of the Horned God. It seems that I'm doing these videos later and later each day because it is just incredibly hot here in South Texas. We've been having triple-digit temperatures all week. Now that's Fahrenheit, folks, for those of you who are outside the U.S. So we don't have water boiling on the sidewalk, but I think you could probably fry an egg on the sidewalk. Anyhow, yesterday I talked about the earliest horned god that we have any record of, the one that was painted in the caves of Lascaux, France, during the Upper Paleolithic. These folks were hunter-gatherers, and it's pretty clear, I think, from the little evidence we have even, that this was a hunting deity or a priest who was taking the role of the hunting deity. Now, I don't mean to suggest that all of our Paleolithic ancestors only worshipped a horned god. There are many, many goddess figurines that were produced about the same era. For example, the Venus of Willendorf, that indicate that goddess worship was pretty widespread. Now, tonight I'd like to move forward into the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, and to the Iron Age. And tomorrow evening we'll talk a little bit about some of the horned gods of classical mythology, Greek and Roman, and moving into the early Christian period. The earliest civilization that we have any record of is located in the Indus River Valley of what is today Pakistan. Now, back a long time ago when I was in school and took history classes, we started with Mesopotamia, with Sumer and Babylon, and with the Old Kingdom Egypt, because this civilization hadn't even been discovered in the 1950s and 60s. I remember in university taking ancient history, and there was maybe a paragraph or two that mentioned Indus River civilizations. Well, since then, a lot of archaeological finds have been made in this area, and we now know that this was, well, unless we find something older, this was the first civilization, and it began about 7,000 years ago. Humans hadn't yet learned to smelt metal, and so we were still using stone tools and weapons, but we had discovered that if you plant seeds and you tend to them, that you can grow the plants, and that way you don't have to go search for them and gather them up. You can just grow them, and that you can herd some animals, sheep, goat, cattle, and that other animals you can keep and feed, and that way you don't have to go chase them down and hunt them. So it was the beginning of agriculture and animal husbandry, the Neolithic. Now, the Indus River civilizations flourished on into the Bronze Age and reached their peak about 2,600 years BCE and continued until about 1,800 BCE. The major cities were Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and sorry if I've mispronounced, but Hindi is not one of my languages. In any case, these were cities. They had brick two-story homes, they had indoor plumbing, running water, they had heated baths in the plazas, and they had what appears to be a system of writing. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't yet been decoded, and it may never be decoded. Most of the inscriptions only involve a few symbols, which makes the decoding difficult to impossible. There was worship of mother goddesses, and there's also a religious seal. It is a clay block, a stamp that had been inscribed with figures of animals, and in the center a more or less human figure sitting in a lotus position with 3 animal faces and a long set of curving bull horns on his head. This was a horned god. Now, we don't know a whole lot about it because this was some 4,600 years ago, and we haven't decoded their writing system. But he's usually called Pashupati, which means the Lord of the Animals or the Lord of the Cattle. Some of the animals around him are domestic animals. I suspect that there are bull horns because cattle was the food animal. Now, whether these people ate the meat or whether they just used the milk and the butter as people in India do today, we really don't know. And perhaps one day we'll find out. We don't know anything about their beliefs. We don't know anything at all about the rituals that are connected with this god. But I think that it's important that there is this continuity. I'm not suggesting that one of these cultures actually learned from the other and that there's some kind of unbroken lineage. I think this may be a case more of sort of convergent cultural evolution. This is a natural thing to do, to create images of the horned god. Moving a little further along into the Iron Age in Western Europe, about 200 BCE, somebody in Western Europe created a beautiful silver cauldron, a pot, and they sacrificed it to their gods by throwing it into a peat bog. This was a fairly common practice, to take a precious artifact and either destroy it or throw it where it could never be used again. Fortunately, it was thrown into the peat bog and eventually in modern times dug up. One of the panels, one of the engraved panels on the cauldrons, called the Gundestrup cauldron because it was found near Gundestrup, Denmark, is a figure of a man wearing Celtic pants sitting in a sort of modified yoga position, very much like the Indus River horned god. He's wearing a torque, which is a sort of a necklace around his neck. He's also holding one in his right hand, and in his left hand he's holding a rather odd-looking snake that has ram horns. Now, this deity has been called Kernonos primarily because there have been quite a few other statues of antlered deities from about the same era that have been found in what is today France, Western Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, and one of these has inscribed below it the word Kernonos, which basically in Latin means horned or horned one. So whether this was the deity's name that he was known by the people who worshipped him or not, or whether this was just a descriptive term, This is the origin of that word coming down into modern neo-paganism. This is where Gerald Gardner got the term Cernunnos and used as the horned god in his version of Wicca. So I'd like to wrap up here as it is getting darker and as the time is kind of getting on. I want to thank all of you who have entered the contest and thank all of you that haven't entered yet. If you're seeing the video for the first time tonight, you can still go back and mirror videos 1, 2, and 3 and send in separate emails with your name, address, and link, and you'll be entered in the contest however many times. I mean, enter early, enter often, increases your chances. I did spend some time this afternoon making about 31 packets of horned god incense, and I suspect I'm going to have to go back to the Magic Cauldron and back to Penzi Spices and probably spend another afternoon or two making some more, because even though it was a big bowl full of incense, I mean, I've never made so much of one kind of incense at one time in my life. It's not going to be nearly enough to send all of you your thank you gifts. So, I said about 2 minutes ago I was ending, and here I'm still rambling. So, until tomorrow, when we take a look at the horned gods of classical mythology and moving on into Christian mythology, this is Dancing Rabbit, wishing you peace and stay cool, folks.